welcome everybody to the Q&A Cafe, and it's very nice to have Bob Bennett here. And before we start, let me just thank our sponsors, Georgetown Cupcake, Linens of the Week, Amano, Rachel Pearson Associates, Prairie Capital, and an anonymous group known as Friends of the Q&A Cafe. I like that. I like having an anonymous group as sponsors. It makes me sound mysterious and intriguing. So let's have more of that. Anyway, welcome.
Thank you very much.
We live in interesting times, don't we?
We certainly do.
So I want to know, as a litigator, is it possible for those of us, the public, to bring a class action suit against all of Wall Street?
It is, and as a defense lawyer, primarily, I would encourage it.
But you've got to, yes, but
I would encourage it.
Yeah. This has got to be, if you, those of us who are young enough to remember the Watergate era here, it was a windfall for lawyers. I would imagine whatever is happening with the economy right now is going to be a windfall for lawyers in your very kind of practice, white-collar crime. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's true. And also, on the plaintiff's side, I'm already seeing notices coming out from plaintiffs' lawyers trying to hustle business for class action suits.
And who are the plaintiffs right now, typically?
Well, what we're still waiting to see what kind of happens, but it'll be people who lost money in their pension funds or shares of stock. A good example would be yesterday, Mr. Fuld of Lehman testified, and one of the things that he was an executive with Lehman, and one of the things, one of the congressmen said, well, look, a week before, you said this, and then a week later, you get a bailout. So that's the kind of thing that plaintiffs' lawyers focus on, that you misrepresented. I'm not saying he did, but that's the thing they would focus on.
Well, it was very interesting in the Hill hearings that, and I imagine as a lawyer, this is the kind of thing that can make you break out in a sweat, when you find out that after your client's been bailed out, that a whole group of them went off to a luxury resort in California for a weeks-long, lark.
Yeah, well, that's an example of, I mean, I don't know who was advising them on that, but
somebody who's obviously not a lawyer.
Well, I don't know. There are plenty of good lawyers, or not good ones, but plenty of lawyers who don't appreciate the if I could use the term, public relations aspects or crisis management rules. There was a violation of
everything that crisis management is about.
And I'm not defending that, okay, but the amount of money there was not very much in comparison to what we're talking about.
$440,000.
But you see, that's something people can grab a hold of, and it says you're arrogant, and that and so it was a terrible.
But I would think that would be the very kind of thing that would inspire loss, that stirs up the people who might bring.
Absolutely, and a jury could get very angry at something like that. It's a
visceral moment.
It's a very visceral moment.
Is this a time when many corporate executives are calling up people like you and putting you on retainer just in case?
No, I don't think.
That hasn't happened yet?
I've gotten calls to retain me, but not just in case.
Well, that's implied.
I think there are a number who perceive there is going to be a problem, and so they. So you've canceled all holidays for the next 2 to 3 years. You'll still go fishing in Montana. I will still go fishing in Montana.
But you would run into them out there too. They'll be everywhere.
They're all over. They're just all over.
Just rake them in.
Generally, fly fisher people are pretty well off and can take bait feeds.
Yeah. That's why I was saying you'll find them there on the banks of the whatever. But you have had people call.
But it's a good thing, because as I was mentioning at lunch, I have a big brown trout on my wall, and underneath its mouth is a plaque which says, if I kept my mouth shut, I wouldn't be on this wall. So I tell a lot of these and if they happen to be fishing with me, it just works in perfectly.
Yeah. What percentage of corporate executives actually listen to your advice?
I don't know that I could.
They always think they know better, don't they?
Well, here's what happens. It's not just corporate executives. Okay. It could be a
people with power.
People with power and influence who are successful have gotten where they are because, as a general rule, they're very articulate, they're smart, and they're always convincing people that their view of things is the right one. And so it's very hard when they come in to see me, when I say, I don't want you talking, I don't want you, it's contrary to their instincts. Yeah. Yeah. And what I try to say is, you can't flunk the investigations. Now, if you look at a lot of the cases of recent times, look at what they get charged with. What did Scooter Libby get charged with? He didn't get charged with the underlying offense of outing an agent. What did Martha Stewart get charged with? It's always, you've flunked the investigation. You've said something that you shouldn't have said.
Well, you lied.
Or you lied, or you said something which the government
you think you can get away with it.
perceives you lied. So it almost doesn't matter. My client Casper Weinberger thought he was a cooperating witness with the Justice Department. What did they? And that was an outrageous prosecution. What did they charge him with? They didn't charge him with any of the underlying stuff. They charged him with saying things to the FBI which they said wasn't true.
When you have these clients who have multiple charges brought against them, which ones are the ones that usually stick? Is it usually the lying one or the fraud? Is that the hardest to get removed?
Because it's the easiest to prove.
Yeah.
It's the easiest to prove. All you have to prove is somebody made a false statement.
So if you were giving seminars to groups of corporate titans right now, as we go into these stormy waters, your first lesson would be just when they show up and say, what is it? Because for street crime, it's you're a person of interest, but what is it up in white collar crime? You're a target. Is that what they call you?
Well, no, it applies to.
You can be a person of interest.
Yeah, it applies to all. But it's very easy for the prosecution to prove a false statement. You said this on such and such a date, and now you're saying this. They both can't be true. That's easy to prove. It's harder to prove a lot of the underlying conduct, and that's the favorite. I was a federal prosecutor. I can tell you, if you want to get somebody, you go with a simple charge. You see Senator Stevens on trial now.
Yeah. How do you think that's going to go?
Who knows?
You think he'll get a mistrial?
I'm not following it close enough. I just don't know. I think judges are reluctant to grant mistrials, but it looks like the prosecutors are pushing the envelope here, and the judge could very easily.
At times like these, do prosecutors get greedier, or for them is it sort of like shooting fish in a barrel?
I think those are not mutually exclusive.
Okay.
I think it's both. I think it's both.
And since tax fraud often comes into these kinds of things, I would imagine when you go into economic hard times, there's a greater rate of tax fraud, right?
I think that is correct.
And
generally,
so that becomes another warning. I would imagine to clients. Is if you're thinking of messing around on your taxes, don't, because the IRS will just lay on more, or the Justice Department will lay on more.
Yeah, I think people get very creative in bad times.
Yeah.
More creative than they should be in bad times, definitely.
Well, do you want to tell us who some of the people are who've called you in the last 10 days?
I would love to, but I won't.
That'll be for your next book, right?
No.